Hey guys, in this video I'm going to do another video on spatial data analysis, and in particular I'm going to go over how you can create Choropleth maps using a package called Leaflet in R. So I have all this code already up on an RPubs site, and I'll put it in the description box below. And basically what I'm going to go over is the R code to create a map like this. So this is an example of a Choropleth map. Choropleth map is a spatial map that's broken down according to certain boundaries. In this case, my map is of the city of Chicago, and it's broken down into community areas. So there are 77 different community areas in Chicago. I did my previous two spatial data analysis videos on the same data set, so this is a continuation of those videos. And basically what you can do is you can color the different regions of your map based on a statistic. So for my particular data set that I loaded in and created a map of, I have the number of gun violence incidents in the city of Chicago broken down by community, and then I have for each community the number of incidents for the first 6 months of 2019. This is, for example, one community, and it has 77 gun violence incidents. And then if I hover over the different communities, I see that I have different numbers for each different community, and the number corresponds to the color bar on the right. And this is therefore an interactive map. I can zoom in and I can zoom out, and it also has the interactive feature of I can put text every time I hover over a different community, and it will give me a different value. So that's something that I coded into the map. This is done using a JavaScript library called Leaflet, and you can also load that in as an R package and basically run it in R, and it produces this map, which can be embedded into an HTML web page. So I'm going to go over how you can do that in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. I have it in RPubs and I also have it in R, but I think I'll just go over it in the RPubs since I already have it up. I'm going to use these libraries. The most important one is basically Leaflet, which will actually produce the Choropleth maps, and then this other stuff is just for working with data and then working with data tables. This next line reads in my data. So again, I'm just continuing using an analysis that I did for two previous videos, which is gun violence incidences in the city of Chicago, and I went over in a previous video how you spatialize this data. So this is kind of what I'm doing all over again. Basically, I read in the data, I convert it to a data table, I clean up the data a little bit to make sure the data points are all in the city of Chicago, and then I spatialize the data by basically converting each address into a latitude and longitude coordinate. So that's just doing these steps here. And then when I plot my spatialized data, each data point is now spatialized according to a latitude and longitude coordinate. So these are a couple hundred data points of gun violence incidences, and the locations are different locations in the city of Chicago. So this was the same as in previous videos. And then next I'm going to read in the shapefile, which is the shapefile of the city of Chicago. So this is publicly available. Most major cities will have publicly available shapefiles, and basically what that does is it gives me the spatial information of the city of Chicago, and also it breaks down the city of Chicago by communities. So that's why I have been using this example over and over again, and I got it from, I think it's called the Chicago Data Portal or something, but it's just publicly available data. And the shapefile basically gives me all the community areas, so the black outline, and these community areas are basically called polygons, which is a term used in shapefiles, and that means it gives you the correct latitude and longitude coordinates of the boundaries and the insides of the different polygons, which are the communities in this case. So having the shapefile allows us to produce basically the background of this map, so the city of Chicago, and then the boundaries, which are the black outlines. Then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to intersect the points onto the polygons of the shapefile, and to do that you have to have the same coordinate reference system for your shapefile and for the spatial points. So in this line I'm manually forcing the two coordinate reference systems to be the same. Usually you don't want to manually force that, so it produces an error, but I know that they're the same coordinate reference system, so I just ignored that warning and I moved on. Then this next line of code is where I actually start working on data manipulation in order to produce the Choropleth maps. So what I actually want is from the original data table that has all the gun violence incidences, I want to bin by community area to get the numbers that I'm going to put in each community area. So I want to basically aggregate that across communities. So I'm going to do that using the aggregate function. So this says aggregate by the column incidence underscore people in my data table. And then I'm going to aggregate by Chicago, which is the name of my shapefile. And that's going to separate or aggregate by communities, which are the polygons in the shapefile. And the aggregation is just the length of the number of incidences. So for each gun violence incidence, that's going to correspond to a specific community. And then I'm just saying count the number of incidences for each community area. And that aggregation is what's going to be plotted. And that's the number that I get when I hover over each community area. Then this next line of code is working with the coloring of the Choropleth map. So I'm going to say to do a red map. So the map is going to be variations or different shades of red. So you can put reds or purples or different colors in this spot. And then I'm going to say my data that I'm actually going to plot is going to be the incidence people. And then I'm saying to have 4 bins, which is the number of bins that you have in your color bar. Then this next line of code will actually plot the Choropleth map using Leaflet. So the only command that you need is actually the beginning part. The second part of the code is just setting up customizations for what you want the plot to look like. So it's like optional parameters that you can also set. But the only command that you need is Leaflet, and then you're passing in the spatialized and aggregated data. And then after that, I'm just setting some optional parameters. So I'm setting the opacity. I'm saying use the color bar that we set above. I'm saying to use the fill color as reds and the number of bins that I specified above. And then this last line is just adding some optional parameters for the legend. So I'm saying to pass in the number of people or the number of incidences, gun violence incidences, and the title is going to be incidences, and that produces a map like this. So I still don't have the hover over functionality added yet. I'm going to add that in the next step. And also what I noticed was with my data set that I passed in chi_ag, I had some missing data. So I told it to only plot 4 bins, but it also is missing data. So it adds a 5th bin of NA or not available. And what I noticed was basically the data table didn't include values that were 0 in my original data table. So communities that had 0 gun violence incidences were missing values. So the 0 was missing. So basically these values should have all been 0, but they just didn't exist in the data table. To fix that, I could have either gone back to the data table and just added those communities and then added the value 0, or I could have, and what I ended up doing was I just manually added 0 to these communities, and that's basically what I did in the next line of code. I manually found the 7 communities that had missing values, which were the grayed out areas in the previous map, and I found their corresponding indices, and then I just set those values manually to be equal to 0. Then I basically worked on creating the final Choropleth map again. So instead of having 4 bins, another way you can bin the data is by setting an actual vector to the intervals that you want. So I said, I don't want it to be so spread out that it goes from 0 to 20. I want it to spread out by values of 10. So I just entered a vector that had 0, 10, 20, and then intervals of 10 basically. And that's another way of setting the number of bins. So you can either set the number to be a specific number, or you can pass through a vector. Either way is fine. Then I just kept the same color bar information. This line of code adds the labels, which is the interactive part that will appear when you want to hover over the different communities and have them pass through a specific string. I called that particular variable labels, and basically what I'm passing through is a string. In particularly, the string is the number of incidences per community, and that's going to get added into the optional parameters later on. So I set that first. Then again, I run Leaflet, and then I'm going to add this additional stuff that has information for the labels that we're going to get when we hover over. So I set label equal to labels, and then there are a couple label options that you can set as well, such as the font size. So I said 15-point font, and the padding on the actual boxes, the white boxes that accompany the text. You can set that as well. And that was the only difference. So so this is the same as before. And then after I added the missing zeros and the additional hover functionality, I get the final map, which looks like this. So now these values have been correctly added as 0, and you see you have the additional functionality of when you hover over the different polygons or the different communities, you can add any text that you want. And that's it for this video, and thank you guys for watching.